The machine gun barrel swung toward the trail where 143 Americans would walk in exactly 12 minutes. Private Eddie Brennan watched through his scope, finger on the trigger, knowing his next decision would either save those men or get him court-martialed. He was supposed to observe, not shoot, not interfere, just watch, but watching meant letting them die. His body had been crammed inside this rotting log for 5 hours. The wood pressed against his ribs with every breath. Beetles crawled across his neck. His left leg had gone completely numb 90 minutes ago, but he couldn't move. Not yet. Not while 13 German soldiers worked 60 yards away, setting up the perfect ambush. The morning of September 18, 1944 had started in darkness. Brennan had crawled into this hollowed oak at 3:30 a.m., inserted by 2 terrified scouts who thought he'd lost his mind. The log measured 9 feet long, barely wide enough for his shoulders. He'd lined it with rubberized canvas to mask the smell of decay. Now he lay in his own private coffin, watching men prepare to kill his friends. Through the scope, everything looked sharp and clear. The German sergeant had a scar running down his left cheek. The machine gunner kept adjusting the tripod, getting the angle perfect. They were professionals, efficient. They'd done this before. They knew exactly where American infantry would advance, exactly how to position their weapon for maximum casualties, exactly how long it would take to kill everyone in the kill zone. Brennan did the math in his head. The MG-42 fired 1,200 rounds per minute. Baker Company would be moving in column formation, bunched together on the narrow forest trail. First burst would hit the lead squad. Second burst would catch everyone diving for cover. Third burst would finish whoever was still moving. Standard ambush doctrine. Textbook execution. Absolute slaughter. His orders had been crystal clear. Captain Holloway's voice still echoed in his memory. Your job is eyes, not trigger finger. We need intelligence, not heroes. Observe enemy positions. Mark coordinates. Report after dark. Do not engage unless you're compromised. Do I make myself absolutely clear, Brennan? He'd said yes, sir. He'd meant it at the time. That was before he'd watched 97 men from his battalion die in 3 weeks, before he'd started keeping a list of names, before he'd realized that following orders meant watching good soldiers walk into death. A German private suddenly turned and stared directly at the log. Brennan's heart hammered against the wood. He stopped breathing completely. The soldier took 3 steps closer. His eyes swept across the log, seeing nothing but forest debris. 5 seconds passed. 10. The private shrugged and walked back to his position. Brennan exhaled through his nose, silent as smoke. Growing up in Johnstown, Pennsylvania had taught him patience. His father had worked the blast furnaces at Bethlehem Steel until a ladle accident crushed both legs in 1936. After that, Eddie became the family earner at 14. He'd worked salvage yards, stripping copper wire, selling scrap metal, learning to see what others missed. The valuable parts hidden in wreckage, the weak points in any structure, the patterns that predicted failure. Saturdays he'd hunted groundhogs in the strip mine wastelands with his grandfather's old rifle. Ammunition cost money they didn't have, so every shot had to count. He learned to wait. 4 hours for a single groundhog sometimes, all day if necessary. Patience became instinct. He also learned to disappear. Mine police didn't like kids on company property, but if he stayed absolutely still against the right background, men would look directly at him and see nothing. Once 2 security guards had searched for him while he sat motionless 15 feet away against a slag pile. They'd given up after 20 minutes. Human eyes register movement, not stillness. That was the secret. Be still enough and you become invisible. Be patient enough and opportunity comes to you. The war had tested both skills. North Africa taught him heat and sand. Sicily taught him mountains and mortars. Normandy taught him hedgerows and machine guns. By September 1944, he'd made himself valuable. 8 confirmed kills in 3 days during the hedge fighting, all single shots, all over 300 yards. They'd given him a Springfield with a scope and told him to keep doing what he was doing. But what he'd been doing wasn't working anymore. The Huichin forest was different. 50 square miles of dense woodland transformed into a killing maze. German machine gun nests hidden in log bunkers that American mortars couldn't penetrate. Snipers in tree platforms. Minefields disguised as trails. Pre-sighted artillery that detonated in the canopy and rained shrapnel down through the leaves. American doctrine said advance in company strength, clear each strongpoint with infantry assault supported by artillery. American casualties said that doctrine was killing them faster than the Germans. 97 men in 3 weeks. Brennan knew every name. Tommy Adler from Brooklyn, shot through the neck while flanking a bunker. Frank Yablonsky from Detroit, stepped on a mine and bled out before the medic could reach him. James Harper from San Francisco, killed by tree-burst artillery that scattered his squad across 20 yards of forest floor. Standard sniper doctrine positioned shooters 200 to 300 yards behind advancing infantry, providing overwatch and suppressive fire. But the forest canopy blocked sight lines beyond 50 yards. Brennan couldn't see targets, couldn't protect his unit, just listened to gunfire and waited for casualty reports. After Harper died, he'd gone to Captain Holloway with a proposal. "Sir, the doctrine doesn't work here. The forest is too dense. I need to get forward of the advance, find hide positions deep in German territory, take out their machine guns before they engage our infantry." Holloway had stared at him like he'd suggested charging Berlin alone. "Forward of the advance. That's suicide, Brennan, and it violates every principle of sniper employment in this army. You stay with the company. That's an order." "Sir, we're losing 30 men a week to machine gun ambushes." "You can follow orders, Private. Snipers don't operate independently. You're not a partisan. You're not a one-man war. You're part of a unit, and units function through coordination and command structure." Dismissed. That night in his foxhole, Brennan had done different math. 30 men a week, 4 weeks until rotation. 120 more names on his list unless something changed. The next morning he'd gone to First Sergeant McKenna, a coal miner from West Virginia who'd survived a bad battle by ignoring a colonel's order to hold position. McKenna had listened, said nothing, then told him to report to Lieutenant Hayes, the battalion intelligence officer. Hayes was 23, Harvard-educated, and had the haunted look of someone whose education had proven worthless. He'd listened to Brennan's proposal, then asked 3 questions. Can you infiltrate to position without being detected? Can you survive 12 hours alone in German territory? Can you exfiltrate if compromised? Brennan had said yes to all 3. He'd never actually done any of them, but he understood what Hayes was offering: deniable authorization. If Brennan succeeded, Hayes would claim credit. If Brennan failed, Hayes would deny knowledge. Either way, Brennan would finally be in position to do something useful. Finding the right hide had taken all night. The forest floor was too exposed. German patrols made noise discipline impossible with dry leaves. Tree platforms were suicide because Germans already owned the canopy. Bunkers required construction time he didn't have. He'd needed something that existed naturally, that Germans wouldn't investigate, that provided concealment and a firing position. He'd found this log at midnight, a massive oak that had fallen years ago, rotted hollow, lying parallel to the German approach route. The interior had decomposed into soft punk wood, but the outer shell remained intact. Several natural knot holes faced useful directions. From 20 yards it looked like forest debris. From 10 yards it still looked like forest debris. The interior smelled like death and mushrooms, but it was dry. At 3:15 a.m. he'd gathered his kit. Springfield rifle, 40 rounds, canteen, rations, rubberized poncho, entrenching tool. 2 privates from recon had escorted him through the darkness. One of them, Angelo, had said, "You're gonna die in there, Brennan. You know that, right?" "Probably not today," Brennan had answered. Now it was 8:50 a.m. and he was still alive, still watching, still following orders to observe and report. But Baker Company was getting closer. He could hear them now. The rustle of equipment, whispered commands, the distinctive metallic click of rifle bolts. They were following the trail exactly as planned. They would pass directly through the machine gun's killing zone in approximately 8 minutes. The German sergeant with the scar checked his watch, then spoke quietly to his men. They settled into firing positions, relaxed but ready, confident. They'd ambushed American units before and won. They expected to win again. Why wouldn't they? They had superior position, superior firepower, and complete surprise. The Americans were walking blind into perfectly prepared death. Brennan's finger touched the trigger. 2 pounds of pressure required. His crosshairs settled on the machine gunner's head, visible above the weapon's shield. Range 62 yards. Wind negligible under the canopy. Easy shot for his skill level. But the consequences weren't about marksmanship. Shooting meant disobeying direct orders, revealing his position. Fighting alone against 13 enemy soldiers with no support and no retreat, court-martial, dishonorable discharge, prison, or he could follow orders, exfiltrate, report. Watch Baker Company get slaughtered. Watch more names added to his list. Watch more families receive telegrams saying their sons died in France doing their duty. He thought about Tommy Adler calling for his mother while blood filled his throat. He thought about Frank Yablonsky trying to hold his leg together with both hands. He thought about James Harper scattered across the forest floor in pieces too small to identify. He thought about Captain Holloway, saying units function through coordination and command structure. He thought about his father's legs crushed because some engineer had calculated that profits mattered more than safety. Sometimes the system kills you. Sometimes you have to break the system. Sometimes the math is simple. 14 Germans or 143 Americans. One soldier's career or dozens of soldiers' lives. Following orders or doing what's right. Baker Company was 4 minutes out. The Germans checked their weapons one final time. The machine gunner racked the bolt. The assistant gunner arranged ammunition belts in neat coils. The sergeant with the scar smiled slightly, anticipating. They were ready. The ambush was perfect. In 4 minutes, American soldiers would start dying. Brennan exhaled half a breath, held it. His finger added pressure to the trigger, 3 pounds. The Springfield weighed 8 pounds. The decision weighed everything. He thought about the list of names. He thought about orders. He thought about the difference between duty and obedience. He squeezed. The Springfield cracked like breaking wood. The machine gunner's head snapped back. He dropped behind the weapon, already dead. The other Germans froze for exactly 1 second. That universal pause when soldiers process sudden death and realize they're next. That second was all Brennan needed. He worked the bolt, the spent casing ejected, new round chambered. He acquired the second machine gunner reaching for the weapon. Same range, same sight picture, squeeze. The second gunner fell across the first, blood mixed with gun oil. The MG-42 sat silent. Now the Germans reacted. Shouts in German. Soldiers dove for cover. The sergeant with the scar screamed orders, trying to organize response to an invisible threat. Brennan shifted aim. Radio operator reaching for his handset, probably calling for support. Can't have that, squeeze. The operator collapsed onto his equipment. 9 seconds, 3 shots, 3 kills. The Germans still had no idea where death was coming from. The sergeant was smart. He started directing fire at likely sniper positions. The ridgeline, the trees, the bunker to the east. Nowhere near the log. The Germans poured rifle fire into empty forest. Brennan watched bullets tear leaves and bark while he waited for his next target. A German soldier firing from behind a tree. Brennan adjusted for the angle, led slightly to account for the man's movement. Squeeze. 4 kills in 15 seconds. Another German private suddenly figured it out. He turned and stared directly at the log, mouth opening to shout a warning. Brennan shot him through the chest before sound could form. The private went down hard, but the others saw where he'd been looking. Rifle fire converged on the log. Bullets punched through rotted wood 6 inches above Brennan's head. Splinters rained down. The log shook with impacts. Brennan pressed himself flat against the bottom interior, making himself as small as possible. The volley lasted maybe 6 seconds, felt like 6 minutes. Wood chips filled his hair, dust filled his lungs, but the log held. The Germans couldn't maintain fire. They were exposed and they didn't know if there were other American snipers positioned. The sergeant made the smart decision. Withdrawal. He screamed orders. The remaining 8 soldiers began falling back by pairs, suppressive fire covering movement. Professional tactics, good discipline, still not good enough. Brennan rose to his elbows, acquired a soldier retreating through the understory. Led the movement, squeezed, the soldier fell, worked the bolt, acquired another, squeezed, 7 left. They were running now, abandoning the machine gun, abandoning their dead, abandoning the perfect ambush that had turned into a nightmare. Brennan tracked the sergeant with the scar. The man was moving in a combat crouch, head swiveling to maintain awareness. Professional soldier, experienced, dangerous, range 80 yards and increasing, difficult shot through forest understory. Brennan led him by 2 feet, accounting for movement and distance, held his breath, squeezed. The sergeant dropped. The remaining 6 Germans vanished into the forest like smoke. Brennan counted to 60 in his head. Slow count, proper count. No movement, no sound except Baker Company approaching from the south, still alive, still intact, still not knowing they just walked past their own deaths. Brennan safed his rifle and began extracting himself from the log. Took 3 minutes of painful squirming. His legs had gone completely numb. When he finally pulled himself free, he couldn't stand. He sat against the log, working circulation back into his calves while he counted. 14 shots fired, 8 confirmed kills, probably 9. The chest shot was fatal, but the soldier had fallen behind cover. Machine gun position neutralized. Radio operator dead, so no warning transmitted. Baker Company saved. Lieutenant Strickland found him sitting against the log at 11:02, rifle across his lap. Strickland stared at the German bodies, then at Brennan, then back at the bodies. What the hell happened here, Brennan? They were setting up an ambush, sir. I stopped it. You were supposed to observe and report. Yes, sir. Not engage. Yes, sir. Strickland walked to the machine gun position, examined the bodies, looked at the weapon's field of fire perfectly aligned with the trail his company had just walked. He returned to Brennan. His face had changed. How many? 8 confirmed, 1 probable, 5 escaped. Strickland was quiet for a long moment. Then you saved my company. Just following doctrine, sir. Neutralizing threats to friendly forces. That's not doctrine, I don't know what that is. Strickland keyed his radio. Baker 6 to battalion. Contact at grid Echo 7. Multiple enemy casualties. Positions neutralized. Requesting instructions. Static crackle, then Captain Holloway's voice. Baker 6, identify who made contact. Strickland looked at Brennan. Private First Class Brennan, sir. Long pause, very long pause, then, send him to Battalion HQ immediately. Brennan arrived at headquarters at 1:40 p.m. Captain Holloway was waiting outside the command tent with Lieutenant Hayes and First Sergeant McKenna. Holloway's face was red. Hayes looked worried. McKenna's expression was unreadable. Holloway didn't wait for salutes. You disobeyed direct orders. Yes, sir. You engaged enemy forces when explicitly told not to. Yes, sir. You operated independently, risking compromise of your position and endangering battalion intelligence operations. Yes, sir. You also neutralized a machine gun position that would have killed or wounded approximately half of Baker Company. Holloway pulled a folded map from his pocket. Lieutenant Hayes, explain. Hayes spread the map on a field table. Germans have been establishing ambush positions along predictable advance routes. This is the third machine gun nest we've encountered this week, covering forest trails. Intelligence estimates they've been responsible for 60% of our casualties in this sector. Holloway pointed at the map. We've been trying to predict these positions based on terrain analysis. We've been wrong 3 times, cost us 42 men. He looked at Brennan. You found one. How? Infiltrated forward of our lines, sir. Found a hide position. Waited for them to arrive. In a hollow log. Yes, sir. For 6 hours. Closer to 7, sir. Holloway stared at him. That's insane. It worked, sir. McKenna cleared his throat. Captain, permission to speak. Go ahead, Sergeant. In 3 weeks we've lost 97 men to German ambushes. Brennan eliminated 1 ambush position and saved Baker Company. If we're court-martialing him for that, we should court-martial every officer who followed standard doctrine and got soldiers killed. Holloway's jaw tightened. That's not how the Army works, Sergeant. Maybe it should be, sir. Silence. Wind moved through the forest canopy. Somewhere distant, artillery rumbled. Hayes spoke carefully. Sir, I gave Brennan authorization to infiltrate and observe. He exceeded those orders, but the result was operationally successful. If we punish him, we're telling every soldier in this battalion that initiative gets you court-martialed. Holloway paced. If I let this stand, every sniper in 3rd Army will think they can operate independently. We'll have chaos, no coordination, no command structure. Or, McKenna said, we'll have soldiers who take initiative when they see American lives in danger. More silence. Holloway looked at Brennan. You understand you should be facing court-martial right now. Yes, sir. You disobeyed direct orders. Yes, sir. And you'd do it again, wouldn't you? Brennan didn't hesitate. If it saved American lives, yes, sir. Holloway exhaled slowly. Get out of my sight, Brennan. Report to Lieutenant Hayes for mission planning. If you're going to be operating forward, you're going to be supervised. Word spread fast. By evening, every rifle company knew Brennan had hidden inside a log for 7 hours and killed 8 Germans before they could ambush Baker Company. Holloway's jaw tightened. Maybe it should be, sir. Silence. Wind moved through the forest canopy. Somewhere distant, artillery rumbled. Hayes spoke carefully. Sir, I gave Brennan authorization to infiltrate and observe. He exceeded those orders, but the result was operationally successful. If we punish him, we're telling every soldier in this battalion that initiative gets you court-martialed. Holloway paced. If I let this stand, every sniper in 3rd Army will think they can operate independently. We'll have chaos, no coordination, no command structure. Or, McKenna said, we'll have soldiers who take initiative when they see American lives in danger. More silence. Holloway looked at Brennan. You understand you should be facing court-martial right now. Yes, sir. You disobeyed direct orders. Yes, sir. And you'd do it again, wouldn't you? Brennan didn't hesitate. If it saved American lives, yes, sir. Holloway exhaled slowly. Get out of my sight, Brennan. Report to Lieutenant Hayes for mission planning. If you're going to be operating forward, you're going to be supervised. Word spread fast. By evening, every rifle company knew Brennan had hidden inside a log for 7 hours and killed 8 Germans before they could ambush Baker Company. Soldiers who'd been ready to call him crazy started asking questions. How'd you find the position? How'd you stay hidden? Can you teach us? Staff Sergeant Wheeler from Charlie Company found him after chow. Wheeler was 31, a construction foreman from Georgia. He sat on Brennan's foxhole rim without asking. Need to know how you did it. Did what? Found the position, the log. How'd you know it would work? Brennan cleaned his rifle while he talked. Germans set ambushes where they expect us to advance. Trails, clearings, anywhere that channels movement. If you want to stop them, you need to get there first and wait. But you can't dig in. They'll spot fresh earth. You can't climb trees, they own the canopy. You need something that's already there, something they'll ignore. Like a log. Like anything. Logs, rock formations, deadfall piles, burned vehicles, anything that's been there long enough to look natural. Wheeler nodded slowly. Charlie Company pushes east tomorrow. Germans have been hitting us from bunker positions. You think this would work? Depends on terrain, show me. They spent an hour with maps. Wheeler pointed out approach routes, known German positions, likely ambush sites. Brennan identified 3 potential hide positions: a collapsed barn foundation, a drainage culvert, boulders on the German side of the line. Wheeler said, I want to try it, got a designated marksman in my platoon. Kid named Taylor, good shot, can you teach him? Teach him what? How to be me. Brennan almost laughed. It's not complicated. Find cover that doesn't look like cover. Get there before dawn. Stay still. Wait for targets. Don't move until you have a shot that matters. That's it. That's it. Oh, and be willing to wait 8 hours in a hole that smells like death and is full of centipedes. Wheeler grinned. Taylor grew up on a farm. He's used to smelling like shit. Private Taylor inserted into a collapsed barn foundation on September 21st at 4 a.m. The barn had burned during artillery preparation, leaving only stone foundation walls 2 feet high. Taylor positioned himself in a corner, covered himself with charred lumber and canvas, and waited. At 9:20, a German patrol established an observation post 30 yards from his position. 6 soldiers, one with binoculars, calling coordinates for mortar fire. Taylor waited until the observer completed his first call, then shot him through the head. He killed 2 more before the patrol broke and ran. Charlie Company advanced through that sector with 0 casualties. Word spread wider. By September 25th, 7 snipers across the battalion were using forward hide positions, 3 in logs, 2 in drainage culverts, 1 in a burned-out vehicle, 1 inside a latrine pit the Germans had abandoned. Results were immediate and measurable. September 1st through 20th, average daily casualties from ambush, 4.2. September 21st through 30th, average daily casualties from ambush, 1.8. Battalion Intelligence compiled a report. Estimated enemy ambush positions neutralized, 14. Estimated American lives saved, 63. Method, forward infiltration using natural concealment. Originator, Private First Class Edward Brennan. Captain Holloway forwarded the report to Regiment. Regiment forwarded to Division. Division buried it. No official response. No doctrine change. No training bulletin, just silence. But soldiers don't need official approval. They need what works. On October 3rd, a German soldier named Otto Richter wrote a letter to his wife that Allied intelligence intercepted. The Americans have changed tactics. Their snipers no longer position behind their lines. They infiltrate our territory during night, establish positions we cannot detect, and wait for us to expose ourselves. Yesterday, we lost 8 men to a sniper we could not locate. The men are calling him the Ghost. They found his position after he withdrew. A hollow tree stump. Perfectly natural, impossible to distinguish from surrounding forest. This is not how Americans fight. Something has changed. German tactical documents from early October showed patterns. Increased caution during dawn operations. Mandatory searches of natural cover before establishing positions. Reduced reliance on predictable ambush sites. The Americans had introduced randomness into a system the Germans had optimized for efficiency. It disrupted their operational rhythm. By mid-October, German units in the sector had adjusted their doctrine. They stopped using predictable ambush positions. They increased patrol frequency. They moved more carefully, all of which meant they killed fewer Americans per engagement because they were too busy protecting themselves to maintain offensive pressure. On October 12th, Lieutenant Colonel Webb finally asked the question everyone had been avoiding. Should we formalize this? He was sitting in the command tent with Holloway, Hayes, and McKenna. Outside, rain hammered the forest. Inside, they studied casualty reports. Webb continued, "We have 12 snipers operating independently using forward infiltration tactics. No official doctrine, no training standardization, no oversight. It's working, but it's chaos." Holloway said, "If we formalize it, we own it. Right now, if something goes wrong, it's individual soldier initiative. If we make it official and a sniper gets captured and executed, we're responsible." Hayes nodded. "Germans consider soldiers operating behind their lines to be partisans, not lawful combatants. There's precedent for summary execution." McKenna leaned back. "Brennan's been doing this for 3 weeks. Taylor, Rodriguez, Williams, 8 others. None captured, none killed in position. Success rate is 100%. At some point we need to admit it works." Webb studied the map. "Division won't approve it. Too unconventional. Violates field manual principles. But regiment might look the other way if results continue. So we let it continue unofficially." "We establish guidelines," Webb said. "Maximum infiltration range. Required check-in protocols. Exfiltration procedures if compromised. We don't call it doctrine. We call it operational guidelines for designated marksmen in restricted terrain." Hayes smiled. "That's the most bureaucratic thing I've ever heard." "That's how you get things done in this army," Webb said. "You don't change doctrine. You create guidelines that everyone ignores the old doctrine to follow." The guidelines were distributed on October 15th. A 2-page document titled Technical Bulletin GR 44 Designated Marksman Employment in High-Density Forest Environments. It didn't mention hollow logs or forward infiltration. It simply stated that designated marksmen may establish observation positions forward of friendly lines when terrain restricts conventional capabilities, provided communication protocols are maintained. Translation: do what Brennan's doing but tell someone where you are. By November 1st, 19 snipers across 3rd Army were using forward infiltration tactics. Intelligence sections compiled collective reports. Before forward infiltration, September 1st through 20th, enemy ambush casualties 127, ambush positions neutralized 3, average warning time 0 minutes. After forward infiltration, September 21st through October 31st, enemy ambush casualties 47, ambush positions neutralized 31, average warning time 15 minutes allowing artillery response. The math was simple. Forward infiltration had reduced ambush casualties by 63%. Conservative estimates credited the tactic with saving approximately 200 American lives in 6 weeks. Nobody thanked Brennan. Technical Bulletin GR 44 didn't mention his name. Intelligence reports attributed success to improved intelligence gathering and tactical adaptation. Headquarters found it easier to claim institutional credit than acknowledge a private had forced them to rewrite doctrine. Brennan didn't care. He kept inserting into forward positions before dawn, waiting, shooting Germans who tried to ambush his friends. On November 8th, he made his 23rd infiltration. A collapsed root cellar 400 yards into German territory. He spent 11 hours inside, killed 4 Germans setting up a mortar position, exfiltrated at dusk. Routine operation. Just another day. Except that morning, First Sergeant McKenna had recommended him for the Silver Star. Captain Holloway approved it. Lieutenant Colonel Webb signed off. The recommendation went to Division. Division disapproved it. Reason given: insufficient documentation of actions under fire. Translation: we're not giving medals to soldiers who violate doctrine even when it works. The Forest Campaign ended in December. American casualties, approximately 33,000. German casualties, approximately 28,000. Tactical outcome, inconclusive. The forest remained a killing ground until Allied forces bypassed it entirely during the spring offensive. But in one battalion of the 28th Infantry Division, casualties from ambush dropped by 63%. Between September and December in that battalion, soldiers stopped dying to machine guns they never saw. They stopped walking into kill zones. They stopped being predictable. They learned to be ghosts. By war's end, forward infiltration tactics had spread to 7 divisions. Official doctrine never changed. Training sections quietly began teaching techniques that looked suspiciously like what Brennan had invented in a Pennsylvania salvage yard and perfected in a German forest. After Germany surrendered, the Army conducted operational analysis. One report, classified until 1954, examined sniper effectiveness in European operations. It noted unconventional employment of designated marksmen in forward concealment positions demonstrated significant tactical advantage in high-density terrain. Recommend further study for incorporation into post-war doctrine revision. The study didn't mention Brennan. It didn't need to. By 1954, every sniper school taught forward infiltration as standard doctrine. They called it hide site selection and establishment. They taught it with presentations and manuals. They made it official. They just forgot where it came from. Eddie Brennan survived the war. Discharged October 1945 with final rank of sergeant and a combat infantry badge. No Silver Star. No official recognition for saving 200 lives. Just an honorable discharge and a train ticket to Pennsylvania. He went home to Johnstown and took a job at the same salvage yard where he'd worked before the war. He married a nurse named Helen. They had 3 children. He never talked about the hollow log, never mentioned the 14 Germans he'd killed, never explained why he'd get quiet sometimes in fall when leaves covered the ground and the forest smell came through windows. In 1963, a military historian researching unconventional tactics found Technical Bulletin GR-44 in Army archives. The historian traced its origin through after-action, reports back to a single incident in September 1944. An unnamed private who'd neutralized a machine gun position while operating alone from inside a hollow log. The historian spent 2 years tracking down witnesses, interviewing veterans, cross-referencing unit rosters. He found Eddie Brennan operating a crane at Johnstown Salvage, age 42, 2 days from retirement. The historian asked if Brennan remembered September 18, 1944. Brennan said, "Can't say I do. What happened that day?" The historian showed him intelligence reports, casualty statistics, doctrine changes that followed. He explained how forward infiltration tactics were now taught at military schools, how thousands of soldiers had been trained in techniques Brennan had invented, how modern sniper doctrine traced directly back to that hollow log. Brennan read the documents, finally said, "That's interesting." "Is there anything you want to say about it?" the historian asked. "Not really. You saved hundreds of lives, changed how the Army fights. You're a significant figure in military history." Brennan handed the documents back. "I just didn't want to watch any more kids die. That's all it was." The historian published his findings in a 1967 academic paper, The Evolution of American Sniper Doctrine. The paper identified Brennan by name as the originator of forward infiltration tactics and credited him with approximately 200 lives saved. The paper was read by 1,400 people, mostly military historians and tactical instructors. Nobody sent Brennan a copy. Eddie Brennan died in April 1992 at age 71. Complications from emphysema. The local newspaper ran a 4-paragraph obituary noting he was a World War II veteran, worked 47 years in salvage, survived by wife Helen, 3 children, 7 grandchildren. One sentence mentioned he'd served as an infantry sniper. The obituary didn't mention the hollow log. Didn't mention Technical Bulletin GR-44. Didn't mention the 200 lives saved or the doctrine that changed because a 22-year-old kid from the salvage yards decided sometimes you break the rules to save your friends. His funeral was attended by 43 people. No military honor guard, no flag ceremony, just family and coworkers and a few old soldiers who knew him before he went to war. They buried him overlooking the valley where his father had worked the furnaces, where Eddie had learned that systems sometimes fail, and when they do, someone has to act. That's the story of the hollow log. That's the story of Eddie Brennan. That's how one man with a rifle changed how armies fight. Sitting motionless inside rotting wood, watching enemies die, keeping Americans alive, and never asking for anything except the chance to do it again tomorrow. If this story moved you, subscribe to hear more untold histories. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. These stories deserve to be remembered.